Okay. Well, I think we can get started. It's 10 o'clock. And so I call to order the PZC Regulatory Review Committee meeting of February 17th at 10:01 a.m. Members present are Cooley, Aho, and Ward. And we have minutes from February 3rd to approve or disapprove. I can see you, Vera, but I can't hear you. Okay.
Well, I can make a motion to approve.
Okay. Okay. Moved by Luann, second by Vera. I approve. Approved them unanimously. Okay, we have, starting off, we have a public comment from Joe Williams. I understand, who's teed up to tell us I've been thinking about that area near Four Corners. He's been thinking about it. We're going to probably discuss areas like that today. So,
Mr. Chair,
yeah.
I know in the past when we've had folks to talk about specific items, sometimes you'll do it under public comment. Sometimes you'll allow them to kind of do their presentation under that actual item. I mean, it's first on the list, so I'm just want to clarify.
I don't think we have any other public comment, right?
I think, Dory, you're just here to listen today, correct?
Yes, I'm just monitoring. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
She'll
well,
kick me virtually if I get any of it wrong.
So let's just start off with the public comment sliding into the next item.
Yeah, so transitional districts. So as you all are aware, at our meeting full commission meeting last week, you had a pre-application meeting for a property on Storage Road, and with a discussion of a potential rezoning to Plan Business 3. And as part of that, I think some of the members of the commission expressed interest in, and that maybe we need to develop a transitional zone because it is identified as transitional on the future land use map. And so the applicant for that pre-application has actually put together a discussion outline, with some thoughts for you. So Joe Williams is here today. It looks like we have Chuck Lee as well. And then Dory actually represents the owner of the property. So that's why she's here. In addition, given that a commission's discussion, staff also pulled some items for your, just as kind of a starting point. So you do have a few articles in the packet regarding missing middle housing and some of the tips and techniques that are recommended for that. I will also say, I know a few of you purchased this book, so we're also looking at the missing middle book to see what's there. And then Paul, the Kirkland Cottage Ordinance.
Our Bible.
So the Kirkland Cottage Ordinance came from Paul. That was also added to your packet this morning. So with that, I think at this point, I'll let Joe kind of do an overview of what they're thinking, and then we can get into a discussion. There's also a copy of the future land use map in your packet so that we can kind of talk about those transitional areas that were identified. And this also, quite frankly, some of the things you talk about today may be applicable to compact residential districts as well.
Okay, Joe.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good to see you again. Thank you for the opportunity. As we explained in a pre-application meeting with you just a few days ago, it feels like, my client, which is a partnership of Clear Mountain Capital and Bell Point Investments, has a contract to purchase the property that we affectionately know as 1750 Storage Road, even though it doesn't officially have that address. And we had spoken with you all about our initial thought and our request for your feedback on whether a rezoning of that property to PB3 would be of interest. And so we're now basically responding to the feedback that we heard from you in that meeting, which was PB3 can unlock a lot of different things. And as Linda just aptly stated, your plan of conservation and development identified that particular property and a few others nearby on the outskirts of the Four Corners area for a transitional zone or mixed use center transitional zone with more medium density residential. And we've been involved in some of the discussions, and we've heard the commission loud and clear about your interest in missing middle housing, which I think is admirable and forward thinking. We've looked more after our discussion with you a few days ago at the provisions you had, or the goals you set in the POCD for compact residential housing. And so I think it's fair to say, and my client, Mr. Lee, is on the phone. He's traveling, but he's listening in, and he can jump in as well. But I think it's fair to say our team was inspired by that. My client is willing to pursue it. And you know, if it works that a commission like yours can set a vision and the private sector buys into it and will pay to build it, then it can be a beautiful thing. So that's the discussion we wanted to have with you about potentially creating a new zone that would advance and try to implement the vision that you all put into place in your POCD. Now, I called it, just for discussion purposes, mixed use transitional zone, because that's the designation you put for the property that we have a particular interest in. However, I think you'll see that just, you know, for the initial outline, we brought in some of the compact residential ideas as well, some of those concepts. And so I don't care what we call the zone, we would do what you wanted. If you wanted to apply it more broadly so that it could cover some of the areas that in your future land use map you identified as desirable for compact residential, that would be fine. So it can be broadened or narrowed to the commission's liking, of course. So when I said location four corners, that's because that's the area that was set for mixed use transitional. But obviously you identified several additional areas in town for compact residential, so that could be expanded. The purposes, I'm sure none of that was new language to you. You know, we took most of that out of different spots in the POCD because we thought all of that made sense. It kind of went together and seemed like it would advance kind of a coherent vision of what you might be looking to do in this kind of zone. So being a transitional area, lower intensity, mixed uses, commercial, residential, missing middle housing, compatibility and transition to the residential neighborhoods around. We were also intrigued by some of the stuff you had in the POCD about how some of these properties are very close to the technology park, and they can be a spot where not only can you have, and this is what we're thinking, you can have office as part of a mixed use development, you can have office space that could serve as a new home for, you know, incubator or startups that come out of the technology park. But it's also housing for people who work in the technology park. And then, you know, you're potentially bringing in people who would want to work in the technology park, and you're providing additional workforce, which everybody seems to be hurting for these days, additional workforce right in the area. And even right on the property, hopefully a live work community where people can walk to their job and walk home from their job. So those are some of the why we've put the goals that way. As I said, most of it came out of the POCD. I know you all have this. If you want me to share screen at all as I'm talking about the map or about the discussion online, let me know. But otherwise, I'll just keep going. And we suggested a variety of possible permitted uses coming, you know, in part out of what we already have in our area, some of the things that are allowed in the professional office zone or the PB3 zone, again, concepts out of the POCD. So you can see those. We listed a variety of potential types of medium density residential, clustered single family homes, townhouses, certain kinds of apartments. And we also suggested, you know, just for discussion under the unit mix, that if I know the commission wants a variety of housing and you want to emphasize the missing middle housing, not the larger apartment buildings in this zone. So if the commission wanted to put, you know, a cap or something within a particular development project on the percentage of residential units that would be apartments, that's something we could talk about. what the density should be, or even whether there needs to be a density. That's something that obviously we want to discuss and hear your feedback on. You know, I read the articles that Linda posted, and I read the ordinance that you put up, Mr. Chairman, and you know, there, as you probably saw, there's some in there that talk about, do you even want to or need to set a density number, or do you want to regulate that in other ways? So that's up for discussion, obviously, but I know most of the zones, you have a density number. So we just put out for discussion something that's sort of in between what you have for RAR 90 and some other zones right now of just under 9 units per acre versus PB3 at 15 units per acre. So trying to hit that medium/high density residential as talked about in the plan. We just put out for discussion the idea of something in the 10 to 12 unit per acre range. And as I said, you can also do, you know, something similar to what you have in other zones where you set the number lower, but you allow for density bonuses. You already have that in the regulations for a few zones. And then we just suggested, again, for initial ideas, some potential dimensional requirements drawing upon similar zones. The setback, we thought, instead of trying to pick a number right now that everybody focuses on, that's something that can get filled in. Wanted to hear your feedback on it. So I just put in for discussion the concept of, rather than having, you know, the largest possible setback that maybe doesn't make sense depending on what the neighbors are to the property, did you want to look at the idea of having a greater setback to a residentially zoned property, but not requiring necessarily as great a setback if on one side of the property you're next to a commercial business, or, you know, to the state highway in the front, that sort of thing. And I think, you know, the commission has the discretion to decide if you want to vary them depending on who you're trying to protect. And then last, I suggested that, and I thought the commission might want it confirmed, that this would be a design development district, and you can pick obviously the design criteria, but just for discussion, I suggest they could be similar to what you have for PB3. There was a lot of stuff in there that I think we're all comfortable with, and you know, decide which uses require a special permit.
So as long as we have you here, and it's always good to hear from developers, let me ask you a question. You probably saw in that material that went around today that missing middle is emphasizing form over density, and you mentioned that fact. If we take the form of houses on Timber Lane, for example, and we reproduce that form on, you have about 20 acres there. So if we reproduce that, if we reproduce that form that's currently on Timber Lane in your 20 acres, but at a higher density than on Timber Lane, and end up with something like the 8 to 12 that you're talking about, is that something that a developer would be interested in investing in?
Oh, I think quite possibly.
Relatively small buildings divided into smallish dwelling units so that we don't build a bunch of McMansions. So that's part of the missing middle idea, is to have smallish, provide a place where smallish affordable places can be built.
Can I share my screen a second?
Sure.
I just want to show you a photograph of something that I ran across literally in the middle of nowhere in Eastford. It wasn't there in 2020, and it was there in the fall in 2021, and I have no idea what it is exactly or how it got built.
Okay.
But this might be something. Oh shoot, it's not.
It's great to get local examples. Yeah.
Yeah. Green system preferences. Okay, somehow it's not letting me. I'm not sure why it's not letting me show this. Of course it's not.
Does she need permission, Linda, or?
Not normally.
Telling me to open my own
Oh, you just got your own one open. Okay.
things here, so I'm not sure why, but pardon me for
Yes,
that.
you should be able to.
Yeah, I have before.
Did you click share screen at the bottom there?
Yes, I do this all the time, but
I thought so.
apparently with this, give a second.
Commissioner Cooley, was that on Eastford Road in,
No, it was on Ashford Road.
I'm sorry, Ashford Road in Eastford?
Yes, yes.
Are they all, I bet I
They're
know
like-
exactly what it is. They're all 1-bedroom homes?
I'm not entirely sure what they are. They look like they're duplexes. They're not 2-story, but they look like they could have a second level in some parts of them. It's a very dense. It looks like they're 1, 2, 3, 4, like 8 to 10 units on a single road that just goes straight out that I can't find on Google Maps. So it must be quite new.
I'm aware of them. I've seen them.
You know what? Yeah.
Oh,
I believe it's a condo development that my
Yeah.
client did, and if you want some information on that, I can certainly provide it from my
Sure.
client.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't get this to open.
So is it like a cottage situation?
Yeah, they look like little, not capes exactly. They have front porches. There
Mhm.
are garages attached. They're all in sort of muted colors. They look like the setback is probably 15 to 20 feet. It's not, maybe 15 to 10 to 15 feet. It doesn't look very big. And they're all very close together. I would say the distance between the houses is probably 15 feet or 20 feet at the most. And
Is that on some kind of sewer and water or?
I have no idea. It's truly surrounded by forest. There's no
Okay.
industry. There are no other developments. There's the occasional single family house on that road.
It really looks sandwiched. I mean, it just looks so tight.
Well,
No.
but it actually looks lovely, frankly. And it looks like the kind of transitional thing that you're talking about from more of a traditional larger lot, single family area to a more dense multifamily apartment type thing. This would be something that,
But
to me, show you the picture.
in Eastford, they're not transitioning to anything.
I know. It's like that. There we go.
Is that it, Luann?
That's not, that might be it. It actually looks, that doesn't quite look.
Looks large.
That looks similar to it, but yeah, they do look big, but they look like they're duplexes. See how
Oh,
they
Yeah,
have
that,
okay.
houses on
this, yeah,
the
so
side?
that's,
Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's it. The picture I have is a
But
little bit different.
Just down the road, or there's the 4 corners there, just down the road, they're just so tight and they're not looking like this. There's only a few buildings like this, I think.
Where are you talking about, Vera?
I don't know the name of the road. I guess the road I take to the lake over there. So it could be Ashford Road,
Going
there's-
towards Buell's?
but they aren't completed yet. So they're not.
All right, this was in October and there were at least, it looks like at least 10 units that are completed. And looking in from Ashford Road, the first 4 or 5 are quite close to that road that's going in on which these reside. So the picture that you just showed one that was kind of close and then more that looked like they were set farther back. And I can't see that in the image that I'm.
yeah,
Luann,
and
can you give us
unfortunately,
the,
it's,
can you share in the chat what the website is you're looking at, and then we could pull that up?
I'm not looking at a website. I'm looking at a photograph I took in October.
oh, yeah, you know
That's
what?
why I can't put it in the chat. I've been trying to figure out
Okay.
how to get it into the chat. And
This
thought I
this
could
will
put it
not be it,
in.
Luann, because this looks like it was built in 2015. I'm looking at
No,
one.
this
So
is like brand spanking
Nahako
new.
Farms.
If you
Yeah,
email
this-
us, can you email us the photo and we'll pull
Of
it
course.
up?
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna
I stuck it into a Word document. So let me, who should I email it to, you, Linda, or to you?
Yeah, or Jen, either one of us.
Jen,
We'll
okay.
throw it up.
I think those duplexes that you're looking at, Linda, that picture that you pulled up, they might be
Yep.
on the corner of Westford Road and Ashford Road. So
Okay,
there is a smaller development that was done on that corner there, I guess it's the northeast corner of the intersection, and then across the street on the other side, on the northwest side corner, I think are more maybe the development, the houses that Commissioner Ward was speaking of. So there were 2 right
Yes.
in that.
Yes, and the ones I'm speaking of don't have, I like what Luann showed. I thought they were very nice, but the others are much tighter and just overdone, I think.
me get back to my question for Joe. If we're looking at small, small scale, small size buildings, that would be an easier transition from timber lane. Is that something that developers might be interested in doing? Small scale cottages or duplexes or homes, denser, but not huge condos with 2 garages in the basement and going up several floors. Something on a much smaller scale.
I do think it's possible, Mr. Chair. It depends on, of course, what's the cost of the property going in for the developer? How much density do they feel like they need to make it profitable? What do you need to do on the site? What are the taxes like? So that's a product I think you don't see as often, because with the rising cost of construction, property values and everything else, it has become harder and harder to make that kind of product work. Once on a lot of these sites that are remaining, once you subtract steep slopes and wetlands and different things from the developable area, it gets harder to do that. And I think that's why you're seeing more proposals to have townhouses and apartments and that kind of thing, because you can get to the number that it makes it pencil out and it works. So it's hard for me to say, because I haven't seen lots and lots of it, although I have seen some higher end, clustered kind of subdivision or site plan things by some major developers. And there might be smaller developers who have less of a cost structure going in, that they might be able to do something like that. And I can think of some folks in the eastern half of the state who would look at it anyway.
This commission has always talked about, or when we went on the field trip way back when, you talked about Freedom Green as this model for,
yeah.
and that's sort of the scale that you seem to like.
Yeah.
And that's more dense than, most places in Mansfield. But when I look at the aerial photo of Freedom Green, you are seeing a lot of open space. You're seeing a lot of landscaping. Is that something that we would try to replicate here, or is that not?
We've always said that we liked Freedom Green, but we've never really insisted on anyone doing that again.
Well, that's what every time we have this conversation, it seems like we go back to Freedom Green.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's just a matter of writing regulations that will encourage that sort of development in other places. So this is the picture, right, in Eastford?
Yes.
Okay.
Once the landscaping grows up, that could look a little bit like Freedom Green, right?
Well, that's part of it, but then just down the road, there's something worse looking. That's
okay.
very tight. That's what I'm referring to. But for Freedom Green, don't they have units connected? Do they have single family homes in there?
Some of them.
Most of them are attached. So they're but they do have some single units. Most are attached into, I would say, 2 or 3 units.
I like the idea of condensing the building envelope, shall we say, so that you've got 4 units coming out of one building.
Quadruplex.
Whatever you call it.
All right.
And they don't, in Freedom Green, they don't seem like they are. They're bigger. They're probably bigger than what middle income truly should be for us.
I think the other thing that was coming out, and I think that's also, again, I think it goes to the scale of the building and the height, and looking through the articles on missing middle, some of the thing they talk about are again, as you said, Vera, limiting the building footprint. So you're limiting the footprint, and with and their recommendation is kind of a 2.5 story maximum, so that you're keeping it within that scale of what you would expect in a single family neighborhood. And so I think, you know, that may be a way to look at this. And then, you know, you could also, depending on the size of the site, have the ability to have multiple unit types. And so as I was looking through this building this morning, maybe, or this book, our little missing middle book this morning, which I think we're gonna have to get more copies for the commission on this so that everyone can look through it. But, you know, you might be able to create something where you have, okay, X, you know, you can have a certain, if you have this many acres, you can have a certain number of buildings that are a larger scale, such as a courtyard building or a fourplex style building, or, you know, it is in, and Joe took some of the language in his proposal from our POCD, which was like, you know, the mansion apartments, the idea of it's a big single family house, but we're not regulating how many units are in it. It's regulating the form, and the number of units that are in it is what you do. And so that way you're not getting into the density per se. You're more looking at the types of buildings. The one thing, and I'd have to check with our building official, but I think, you know, one of the possible financial benefits to the kind of these smaller buildings that are 1 or 2 units is I believe those fall under the International Residential Code, not the International Building Code. So there may be a difference in permitting costs as well as kind of construction costs on those, because you're not getting into sprinkler systems and things of that nature when you're doing those smaller buildings that are designed for 1 or 2 units.
I thought there was a nice list of 6 things in one of the things that you distributed. One of them was the emphasis on form and scale rather than units and density. I thought that was a good point. And maximum width and depth and height. So that's part of that form idea. And no parking underneath. There seemed to be a good reason for that. And then I put 4 and 5 on some other piece of paper that I missed. What was 5? What was 5 and 6?
So it was, so it's, so 1 was regulate maximum building envelope, form and scale rather than number of units and density. 2, carefully regulate building width and depth. Be careful about allowed height. So that was the, you know, ideally no more than 2.5 stories to keep it house scale. But that you may have some which could be 3+ stories, but it's really that's limited and applied in only certain locations. Do not allow townhouses or single family detached homes in which the ground floor is mostly parking. Some single family contexts are better than others for missing middle housing. And then communication and framing tips. So this was the last 6 was more about how to have the conversation with the community. So
Okay,
instead of focusing on, oh, we're increasing density, talk about we're increasing housing choice, availability, affordability. And you know, how do you communicate this and make it more palatable, and try and remove some of the fear that's associated with density. So, you know, one of the things with missing middle is, you know, and a lot of these examples are looking at urban areas. So what we're talking about here is really, you know, trying to do missing middle housing, not on a 1/4 acre or a 1/10 of an acre infill lot, but on a, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 acre suburban rural lot. And, you know, so how do you create neighborhood and community in that space? So we're not in the infill, we're doing entire communities of this housing. And
that was part of it that I wanted to pick up on too, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I read that and I saw the opinion stated there about townhouses with parking underneath. And as you know, that's a type of product that proposing in the area and would like to do on this site. Now, I will say, you know, this is a statement of opinion that is, as I think Linda said, is promoting more of an urban form. That was one of the reasons for that statement of opinion in the article there, and trying to replicate urban neighborhoods in like Brooklyn and San Francisco and London. And it also talks about they don't deliver a good level of affordability. So I would just say, please keep an open mind on that, because if somebody comes to you with that kind of product, which we are interested in doing, full transparency, you will get the level of affordability that your regulations require. And I don't think they're not going to be able to be priced in the way that they're talking about in this article with, $1 million things in Washington, DC and that type of stuff, because that just wouldn't work in the marketplace
Mhm.
in Mansfield, even if they weren't restricted. So I would just ask you to keep that in mind. I think you can still get a missing middle, good mixed use, live work kind of community with townhouses and other things on the same property and advance a lot of those goals. So this is not necessarily a don't do it or you don't get middle housing kind of opinion, I don't think.
So I think, Joe, the one thing I would say to that, and I want to look more at the missing middle book is I think there are other reasons for that, kind of discouraging the garage on the ground floor. And part of it is creating, community and having active space on the ground floor where your neighbors are getting together. And I will say, I live in a townhouse that is a garage on the first floor. Like that is it. It's a garage and a front door. And that it's not a very attractive look. But it also means that my activated space, my kitchen, my living room are on the second floor. So it's like you don't just walk out the door. It's not like you look at the window and see your neighbor and go, oh, I need to talk to you about something, because you're not seeing anybody. So I think that's the other part, is also the kind of the building of neighborhood and interactions.
Now, at stores downtown, they have garages on the first floor, but they also have front doors on the first floor.
So
So the garage-
they did, so the garages are on what would be considered the backs of the units. So the
Right,
fronts of the
yeah.
units face each other across a courtyard. The
Right.
garages are on like a little alley lane.
So that's another way to do it.
Yep. They have porches too, which are charming,
Yes, right.
conducive to neighborhood interaction.
I don't think they have to be $1 million
No.
in the Mansfield context, especially if we make smallish ones. If we make 1,000 square foot cottage, I would expect that to be more in the range of $250,000. If
Right,
it's-
and that's my point exactly, that his concern about this kind of product isn't affordable and it becomes, this really, I don't think would be the case. So I agree with you.
So I'm just looking at, are you familiar with Nutmeg Court as part of Freedom Green? I just kind of shared those, I just scaled that off. And I'll share my screen. Is that, I don't know if I'm distracting everyone or.
No, go ahead and show it. Yeah.
So this is so that's that portion of off of Puddin Lane. It's called Nutmeg Court. It's I would say probably 1.5, between 1.5 and 1.7 acres. But because of it's set back, which I think fits well on Puddin Lane there. So, but that I'm not, those are like 1,500 square feet. But I don't know, what do folks think about that?
Yeah, so you got a little cluster there. That's 3 houses?
That's 3 houses
Yeah.
there. It's part of the Freedom Green condos. So it's actually, on the same lot. This
Right.
is
Single family? Are they
they're
single family?
They're single family, but they're condos, but this is what it looks like from the street.
Right, but they're separated from each other. Yeah.
Yeah, but they all have this shared driveway, and it's sort of like but again, this is not the density that, this is basically 3.
And it
Yeah.
seems like in that same space, they maybe could have put 5 or 6.
Well,
because
but they could have, but they were looking at the context of Puddin Lane, right? So they could have put those houses closer, and then had a little bit of a, maybe a green in here, but
Yeah.
that.
Or they could have made it, a 3-unit dwelling as well.
Well, and that's what you would have down here you'd have these kind of attached units like at Freedom Green.
What was the setback off of Pudding Lane? Because it looks like it's fairly consistent with the Freedom Green properties to the, I guess it would
I'm
be
gonna
west.
guess it's probably 100, Luann, just based on,
Yeah, because it seems like it was the
A lot.
setback requirements that limited that development more than anything, right?
yeah,
I
so
mean,
100 feet would be I think is the DMR requirement for a
Yeah.
setback.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, it looks like it's about 100 feet. but-
Yeah,
So I
whereas,
think, you know, it's just to, so in terms of the transitional zones, well, I'm just going to go through kind of some of the questions. Is there an interest in looking at regulating building scale and dimensions and height as opposed to number of units per acre, and saying, if we can get the scale of the buildings right, we're not going to talk about how many units. You know, if you want to put 3 units in that building or 1 unit in that building, that is your decision. But we're going to, is that an approach?
I think
you wanna-
scale, yeah, I think scale is important, and probably, I'm thinking of the hypothetical person on Timber Lane. The scale would be the first thing that they would hate. If you bring the scale down, then of course they'd also be interested in density. But I think once you get down to a manageable scale, it becomes much more palatable. And also thinking about even Westwood, Eastwood, Hillside Circle, if we were to increase density, the scale would have to be small in order for it to be palatable. And I
Okay.
think in that Kirkland regulation, it says you can put 2 houses where there's now 1 house, but that second one can't be bigger than the one that's already there. So it, you know, you keep the same scale rather than building apartment buildings in an area that has single family homes.
Mhm.
So I think that scale is extremely important to get the scale right.
Okay. So basically, so I think this is then gonna come down to essentially your different housing types. So you're gonna have different dimensional requirements based on the housing type. So let's go with a cottage unit might be one size versus a townhouse. How many townhouses do you want to allow to be connected? You know, some of the other housing types in here, like a courtyard building. And so I think you can look at, you know, all right, your regulations are going to be based on your building type that you're doing, and then having a mix of those building types. And is there a maximum of percentage or number that you want to see of larger scale buildings? So in terms of a development, so that you're keeping that scale. And identifying what building types would be permitted in this transitional zone.
Mhm.
And then I think you also would need to look at probably open space requirements as well as to how you're balancing, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yep. I think one of the things that you encapsulate with that is that one of the things that was kind of bothering me with the missing middle stuff is that, you know, the photographs from California talk about these smaller multifamily units blending in seamlessly with the single family houses, but those single family houses are, you know, 4,000 square feet, right?
Yeah.
Which are, you know, are larger. So they're talking about, you can fit a nice sized apartment building into the same type of neighborhood that you can these rather larger homes, but that's not the scale we're talking about in Mansfield. We do have some neighborhoods that do have rather larger houses than that, but most of our neighborhoods don't. They have much smaller houses.
And we could scale down to that size, the same size that we have now.
Right, but the problem with that from a development perspective is that may not be something that is cost effective, that, you know, that could not be financially feasible. So, you know, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we can make regulations, but if no one wants to build anything, then we haven't progressed any.
I would say you can also think about the scale in relation to the property context, the buffer, the screening, that sort of thing, because the scale is obviously of great importance to what's the impact on its neighbors, and is it respectful of the single family neighborhoods around it, and are you getting an appropriate transition between much higher density, like in our case, that you'll have across the street versus the on the other side, the single family residential neighborhood.
Mhm.
So I would suggest, and there's lots of concepts and regulations that think about that sort of thing. Okay, you can be a little taller if you're farther away, or you can do something as long as you have an effective screen, and the commission looks at that as part of the rezoning or the special permit or whatever it is. So you could have flexibility that way too, which may actually be more likely to produce
Mhm.
a development plan that's coherent and that you like, if you allow that flexibility, by focusing on the form and the scale and the actual property setting in that context. So just an idea.
Yeah, the form wouldn't have to be the exact same form as the neighbors, but it shouldn't be 10 times as large, maybe twice as large.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's the right idea, to take in the totality of the circumstances of a particular site. I just think writing regulations that would encapsulate that sounds really challenging, if that makes any sense, just to try to keep that flexibility, but also give a clear statement of what we're looking for. So.
Right. I mean, you could peg it to concrete things like your form can be X so long as you have a buffer to something that's at least this much. You can do that, and you can or you could also have flexibility for the commission to decide as part of special permit, so long as the whatever it is we're looking for, the buffer, or it is sufficiently protective or screened or that sort of thing. That one's a little tougher to tell. I get it. That's tougher to tell the world what it is, but that's part of special permit review, and people deal with that kind of thing all the time.
I think ideally we don't need a buffer. It seamlessly flows into the other development, and it's not offensive to either side.
I think you'd have a challenging time convincing neighbors of that, frankly. Yeah, but one of the other challenges too of building in Mansfield is the wetlands that we have and the slopes that we have. It's not a nice, I grew up in Ohio where everything's flat. It's very easy to build there. You can build anything you want anywhere you want, right? But one of the challenges I think I have seen in the plans that we have seen come before us is trying to make use of the space that you have in a way that's consistent with the overall form of the development, consistent with neighborhoods around it, and yet still takes into account all of these site-specific issues, with slopes and wetlands and things like that. So, those features also provide buffering to an extent, hopefully with different neighborhoods, but they also provide a challenge. One of the issues I think with the site that we saw the pre-application presentation on was that all of your buffering is on the site where there are no, your natural buffering, if you want to call wetlands and slopes and things, is on the site where there aren't any houses, which pushes you closer and closer to those edges where you do abut other, single family houses. And that's challenging to try to figure out how to balance those things.
Well, right. And that's very well said, Commissioner Cooley, because you do have that context to deal with, and that, frankly, that's one of the reasons that my client has been willing to look at townhomes, reacting to some of the feedback we received, but also because a lot of these sites are hilly and sloping, and to be able to do something that works on the site, you can step down the townhouses on a grade in a way that you can't do as easily, even with a mansion apartment or a garden style apartment building. And it can be even tougher to make it work to get sufficient density if you had detached single family homes. But so the townhouses offer on certain settings a unique opportunity to be able to work with that grade and have a unit and then another unit right next to it, but it's a little bit lower. So.
So,
What should be our next steps on this?
well, I do have some other questions. So in terms of uses, so I just want to focus on the mixed use center transitional zones. Just want to kind of discuss what types of uses, we've talked about these different residential building types in terms of uses. What about non-residential uses? What would you be thinking of for this particular? And then we'll have to, I think the same types of scale and building type discussions probably apply to that. I mean, what I'm sensing here is that you're almost moving towards kind of our first form-based district outside of storage center.
Yep. I think that's,
And it wouldn't necessarily rule out businesses, but it also form-based.
Right. And so, so for example, in the outline provided by Joe, it was, so it was office and light industrial were the two kind of non-residential uses, I would say, that were put in there. And educational, municipal and religious facilities were the others.
Yeah, I think all of those uses would be appropriate there.
Okay. All right.
It didn't say retail. It just occurs to me. I'm not saying necessarily we're going to propose it on our particular property, but I don't know if you want that to be available in this kind of thing. I mean, that's sort of a classic mixed use formulation. It's just, I don't know that that's what you're going for in these areas.
I think let the members speak. My guess is that, a lot of these transitional areas, I think were applied to properties that had that split zoning of office and residential. So I think it's a way of trying to get you away from split zoning, but allowing that mix of uses without getting to the, a retail use.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what we're thinking.
One of the things we don't want is additional traffic that's coming in and out. So you want something that's low in traffic use, such as an office. I would imagine.
Okay.
So I think, next steps, I mean, we can work on this. I think that, it sounds like, we have some developers who are interested in working on regulations here and trying to come up with something.
We haven't scared them off completely yet.
I will say, I think the challenge for all of us is going to be that it's to do a form-based district. It's a little bit different than doing a regular zoning district. And usually there would be, an architect, involved in kind of helping craft those regulations. So I don't know if that's something, I
think that would be a good idea.
I think we can work on this. We may have to see if, our consultant can bring someone on to subcontract to help do this. I don't know. I know, Joe, you guys are under a time frame, and I know that, that's why so I'll defer to you and Dory in terms of whether or not you want to see if this is something you want to pursue in terms of proposing yourselves. Or if you want to let the committee take the lead.
And I did sense or see some interest coming in form-based. I didn't put the outline together that way because it is a newer thing to try to bite off for other areas of town. So I don't think my client's opposed to it, but I have to go back and circle up with everybody and see. And yet it really is something that it's very important for the commission and the constituencies that you want to talk to, and to get some of that professional assistance on it, because it's a little bit different of a thing. I mean, if it's done well, it can be a very good thing. But let me talk to my group and see how they feel about it. I know if you are looking at the size of particular structures, I would just mention also, you might want to keep in mind, I know the commission also has a goal of wanting to see more family housing, which is great. There's not a lot of towns that actually say that kind of thing. So I'm really glad to hear you say it. But to get 3 bedrooms, if we try to keep the form too small, it's tougher to do that. And then you're in kind of a different category of product. But it doesn't, there's lots of options, and there's different things you can do on different parts of a site and with different product types. So that's certainly a discussion that I think is worthy of having. Let me go back and, like I said, talk with my group about the timing and see what they want to do.
And thank you for participating. I think that feedback is
Appreciate
always valuable.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the discussion.
Okay, we can move on to solar.
So also coming out of your last meeting,
Okay,
you know, I know there were questions about whether or not we can require someone to incorporate renewable energy into a development. And so, you know, and I did talk to our attorney and he was like, no. So, yeah. So what I did do just as kind of I know there isn't really desire to encourage that. So, you know, I did pull this from an organization called Soul Smart, in terms of, you know, ways in which you can kind of encourage and some of the best practices for solar. So, you know, some of those things include, you know, and by right photovoltaic, we're already doing that. You know,
And
if
so
you
we
want
already
to,
did that.
yeah, I mean, if you want to put panels on your roof, great. If you want to put them, you know, freestanding, we have that. You know, the solar farm is a whole different issue. One of the things that I think was in here that I thought was interesting. So some of it is you can also do essentially what's kind of the solar friendly, which is you're protecting other, you know, solar access. And then, so one thing that I think it was in here.
and can we require people to have their roof strong enough to support
That's-
solar, even if they
so
don't
that-
put it on?
Yeah, so that was kind of towards the end of this. So it looks like it starts on page 14 of the document. So it's what's called solar ready.
Yeah.
And so, you know, whether or not we can do this, and I think if you do this, then it becomes, you know, what there may be a cost, but, you know, so solar readiness, and I'm just going to share my screen because it has a list of bullet points in terms of what solar
Yeah,
ready is.
And I think it'll become so obvious that that's a good thing to do, that people will do it on their own. But we can kind of get them prepped by being solar ready for it.
So components, you know, that your roof is, you know, your load bearing is sized to support the weight of a solar installation, you know, and some of this, the reason you know, some of this may be a little bit tough because we're getting into building code stuff here. And I know from talking to our building official, he's like, I can't require anything beyond what the Connecticut building code says. And that's where the challenge comes in. Because all of this is building related. And I would need him to say, yes, it's doing this. And again, he's going to say, I can't require that. I can't as a building. So the question is, can you, as the commission, require it? And so they, it looks, you know, it sounds like the 2018 International Energy Code includes appendices for solar ready. So we'd have to probably take a look at that. But that's probably, other than solar access, that, and, you know, some of the things we're already doing, looking at you know, being solar ready and saying, you know, we want to do this. And I think, I don't know that we can apply it to 1 and 2 family homes. I think, again, it comes down to that question of, if it's a special permit, do you, as the Planning and Zoning Commission, have the ability to condition that and say, you know, as a special, this is what we're going to require if you're doing this type of use? And, you know, so that would be a conversation with the building official and the town attorney as to whether or not we can do this. But, you know,
we may not even be able to do that, right?
Yeah,
no, it's too burdensome. Frankly, it's too burdensome, you know, and it's not just the added cost to make your roof bear the weight. It's trying to deal with the interconnections. You know, that's time consuming and very expensive, especially if you're trying to require that on an apartment building or something like that, because then you quickly start getting up into scale. And, you know, part of the thing is we can address this in other ways. I mean, not we as the commission, but we as the town, by making it easy to access and find all of the ways that you can finance this, through the Green Bank. So, if we had a way of providing anybody who comes with a special permit request information, whatever the current policies are in the state, as far as any kind of incentives or subsidies, or even financing that you could achieve through the Green Bank to make something like that viable. I mean, that's at least something we could encourage. But I don't know if I don't think it's within our purview, frankly, at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right, unfortunately. But, some of the applicants are shockingly unaware of the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I think I know what you're talking about, but you also have to remember where these people are coming from. They're not coming from an area in which this is something that's incentivized.
Yeah, yeah.
So, that's why I'm saying, because we don't know where our developers may be coming from, it might be really helpful to make sure that they're aware of all the particular incentives that we have in Connecticut and the financing you can get through the Green Bank for, more commercial or industrial grade solar. So,
And that's
Yeah, I mean, I
probably
think-
as much as we can do.
Well, and because the only incentives you can really offer get down to essentially things that you control, such as
Yeah.
density and height.
Yeah.
Those are the things where you can offer, incentives. Other incentives such as permitting, fee reductions, that's something that the town council would need to, to consider. So I think, so what I'm hearing, so I just wanted to bring this back because I know that there was discussion, how can we encourage this? And I think you're right, Luann, to an extent. Some of it is education and just saying,
Yep.
we really want to see this, please consider it, and we can provide, consider being solar ready, like consider that. But I think requiring it is,
No.
unless the state of Connecticut starts requiring it as part of the building code, I think we have a challenge.
yeah, and I don't think you're going to see that because I think what you do is you suddenly put a big premium on the cost of building houses.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
problematic in a state that's this depauperate of affordable housing.
Okay, all right.
Um,
We'll forget
but-
it.
But I mean, I know, Linda, you can cover your ears if you don't want to hear this, but we will be updating the plan of conservation and development fairly soon. And these are the kinds of things that definitely could go into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Good point.
don't have, there was a story on NPR the other day regarding the rebuilding of that community in Colorado that was
Mhm.
decimated by the fire.
Yep.
And how they're looking at this as an opportunity to require that all buildings meet these specific, solar and wind protection. But people are saying, you're unduly burdening us. We are
Mhm.
not going to be able to afford to rebuild
Mhm. Yeah.
unless the government helps us to incentivize this. So it's
Yeah.
a real
Well, that's-
issue.
Yeah, and that's how you end up in court with your regulations challenged. So,
No.
So, okay.
Okay, what else do we have today?
I don't have an update on the single family residential. I probably should have just taken that off.
Okay,
One other
Um,
thing though, just as just sort of, this may be just an academic exercise, but sustainable seed, just to learn more a little bit about this Soul Smart. Did Linda, did you forward the work? It's a webinar that's happening today at 12 that Sustainable CT is offering about the Soul Smart. And it's, from other states, but, unless we start learning about it, we'll never get there. We're here, and someday hopefully we'll come.
Yeah, no, I have not forwarded that. I did respond to Ginny that before we apply, Mike has expressed concern that that this could
Right. I don't think we're ready to apply.
backtrack us in terms of,
But it
The-
just would be a good learning opportunity.
mhm.
so no, I did not forward that on. So, but I will say that it does lead us in. Thank you for the transition, Jen, to sustainable CT.
so there's some things we can do for that, right?
So Jen has informed me that we have 280 out of 400 points that we need.
No, we're going to be fine. We're going to get our recertification, no problem. And this is what I told the Conservation Commission last night. I said, look at, we don't this is certification. It's great if we get the points. We should be looking at these as best practices. If we can get the points for the certification, great. If we can't, Mansfield's going to be fine. We will get our silver certification, and in 3 years, we're going to need to go for gold. So, and get recertified. So I think these are good things to keep in the back of our head, and we'll be working with our intern is fastly getting points for us. And you know, if we need to, if there's some low-hanging fruit that we can do, but I don't feel like we should be pressured just because it's sustainable CT.
Okay,
So yeah, the stuff that I pulled out, I just went through the actions and said, where are there some things in zoning or planning that, you know, if we wanted to tackle, we could. So for example, I think there's something on dark skies, where we've, you know, we work on this for the most part as part of our development, but it's, you know, one of it, require all projects requiring land use approvals or substantial modifications to have dark sky compliant fixtures on exterior lighting. You know, that's something we've talked about, and it's something we try to do anyway as part of our review. But I think that's, you know, some of these are things that we can incorporate as we move forward and we can look at. And, you know, if there are things we've already been talking about. So one on diverse housing options. We've already done the affordable housing plan, yay, Jen. But then, you know, so one thing to think about is, you know, we've already done the ADUs. So one thing we have not done, and I just wanted to throw it up here, was the state approved incentive housing zone. So that's something that we can have discussions about. So you have to meet certain locational requirements, but that the purpose is essentially to say, look, it sets aside at least 20%, what is it? 20% of the units would have to be affordable for a minimum of 30 years. The thing with incentive housing zones is there is no special permit. You can't require it as a special permit. It has to be a site plan approval. There may be some density requirements that go with that, but one of the things is we talk about this transitional zone in terms of focusing on form and scale, so that if we're not getting into density, that may be a way that you can kind of almost pair a transitional zone with an incentive housing zone, if that makes any sense. That going to a form-based zone where you're also saying, look, if you do this, we're comfortable the scale is going to be compatible if you meet these requirements with the adjacent property. So we can do this as a site plan approval, not as a special permit. So things to think about as we move forward. So
What we really need to do is get a diversity of people on the Affordable Housing Committee, because we can get some good points for that and get that thing rolling. So that's one thing that we'll get, because we're getting a lot of points already for this action 11.
right. So yeah, so there, I mean, there's some stuff on agriculture friendly practices. Parking, I think, was looking at parking caps and eliminating parking minimums. So, you know, those are things we can kind of go through and look at. But again, I just put up things that if we're already working on it, let's look at it. As Jen said, this is not something where we're going to start amending regulations in order to get points for certification. It's if they're best practices, you're already looking at it. We just wanted to make you aware of it and say, you know, here are some things that we can loop in as we make changes.
I have
So
a question about sustainable CT certification. Jen, you just said we'll need to go for the gold, but I don't even see that they do a gold certification. That's what I'm.
No, not yet. They're coming out with it this year.
Got it. Okay, I was wondering about
they
that.
don't do that yet, but for our next recertification, we'll go for gold. But no, they do not do gold yet. We're at the highest level. Yay, Mansfield.
I'd heard people talking about it in other contexts and like bemoaning that their town wasn't gold. And I was like, I don't think they do gold.
Yeah,
So,
well, when our former town manager was here, he said, even though Sustainable CT doesn't have platinum, we want to be platinum.
right.
We need to go for the most points.
Great.
I think Mansfield, I think it's great. I think Mansfield already does a good job. This is a way to inventory and promote
Yeah.
what we're doing. But we don't need to get the most points because that's just, will drive us all crazy. We have enough going on.
Yeah, so it's, you know, we've got, this will get wrapped in, so I will say in the last, so one of the things we're doing, I have put a requisition in for a new purchase order for our consultants, so if that gets approved, we will be
Great.
sitting down with them to have a conversation. And I think, you know, part of that conversation that I may ask them is, you know, could you, you know, there's a lot of interest in form-based regulations, which, you know, typically as planners, we may not necessarily have that expertise. You know, do you have someone that you could bring in to work with to do that form-based?
And
those
I need
requirements?
to go have a discussion with a guy that has a chainsaw in his hand.
Oh, well, you go do that and
Are
be
we
safe.
pretty well wrapped up
We're
today?
wrapped up.
Okay, let's continue on another day.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys for all that you do to put these together.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.